first begin to talk about my work, I really like to talk about the importance of um, family and the importance of the time I get to spend with them. Being a first generation American of Mexican and Guatemalan descent, I oftentimes get sparse time with extended family. So I have a lot of family in Mexico and Guatemala, but some family here in the US. And I really have been making work that really tries to document and really tries to freeze these memories and moments in time with my family. The image you're seeing here is of a nopal, and the nopal is really important in my work because it kind of serves as a reminder to the times that I've gone to Mexico and traveled there, and then the further and further I get away from the city, and the further I get into like more rural and country land, I begin to see this repeated form of the cactus or nopal. Here's a photo of some family members. It's my uncle on the right and my mom on the left. And this is outside of San Luis Potosi in Mexico. And this is just near my grandparents' farm. And these are really like the intimate moments that I'm trying to document and preserve within my work. On the right here, you can see my uncle. He's just cut a little piece of nopal or a penca de nopal to bring down so my mom can start to cut them open and just start passing around so we can all eat the fruit. So here on the left is a photo of just a photo I took of a time when I was preparing the nopales with my family. So you can see that we've started to peel and kind of prepare the nopal so there's no thorns or anything on the left here. And on the right, you can see the cactus has been grilled and we're starting to dice it up to make a cactus salad. I've really started to see my work revolve around food because it is a time and it's a time that I get to spend with family to socialize, and we get to spend time preparing the foods, and then everyone brings their own recipes and we all get to share everything. So for quinceañeras or big weddings or parties like that, we all get to spend time the day before, the day of, preparing foods and just spending time with each other and reconnecting after months or years of not seeing each other. And this brings me to my first piece, which is probably the first piece where I began to really explore my familial histories and really begin to think about the lands that they inhabit. This piece was made to kind of pay homage to the land and the time that I've spent in Mexico, seeing that repeated cactus form emerge as I'm traveling from the city out into the country. I wanted to make a piece to have here in the States with myself and be able to share with my family to remind them of like the great times we spent over there. When making this piece, I was really interested in experimenting with surface and trying to have the surface really emulate or kind of resemble the land that the cactus inhabited. The technique I used was one that I found when researching Robert Sperry, who used to be a professor at the University of Washington, and he used this technique where he would layer first the glaze, and then on top of that he would layer the slip, and then once fire it through. And in doing this, you get this really great texture and that resembled dry riverbeds and kind of dry fields that the cactus really inhabited. And on the right here, I decided to throw in this small like figurative element when making the piece because, like I said before, driving past these cactuses, they almost look like figures and almost look like they're waving at you. So I decided to throw this kind of small, funny in a sense, figurative element. And this brings me to a piece called El Pasaje. And this piece is made thinking about and really exploring the time people spend crossing the border and coming into the United States. So people crossing the southern border and really kind of risking their lives in order to come and try to create a better lives for themselves and their families. And I was thinking about the repeated landscape that they traveled through, and I was trying to bring that into a gallery space and have people experience that for themselves. And in this installation, I used the repeated form of the maguey in order to kind of pull the installation more directly to my culture, thinking about the maguey in Mexico being used for mezcal, and in Guatemala, the maguey is broken down, and the fibers from that are used to make textiles and other clothing. On the base here, you can see I used car tires, and I spent a lot of time just cutting open these tires and flipping them inside out and inverting them in order to speak about the road traveled and kind of the long distances people traveled. So I found these old worn tires and decided to use them as the base for these forms. And when looking at the color, I really pushed and tried to add meaning to that because I didn't want it to just resemble the plant itself, but also wanted to invoke a conversation where people would think about why these plants are white and why are they patterned like that. And it was just, again, thinking about the landscape and thinking about, at the same time, the loss of identity of people coming into the United States and kind of gaining perhaps like a new language, but also losing bits and parts of their cultural history. Niño de Oro was a piece I made, once again, trying to think about like historical times and kind of just where I come from and histories beyond the ones that I know. And I was really thinking about the Spanish conquest and how the Spaniards came and went and to find new land and landed at the Aztec Empire. And I was just thinking about scenarios in where people in the Americas, like for example, in Guatemala, people in the past have signed up for like guerrilla groups or even the army there, and been so young they didn't necessarily know what they were fully signing up for. So I created this figure in order to kind of think about that relationship and create my own narrative of like this situation, just thinking about these histories. And on the arm here, I decided to make this patch that kind of the scarification of, I took it from a Spanish replica of an escudo, which was the currency that the Spanish made when they would, the Spanish had in their country, but they made a lot of this with stolen Aztec gold. So I wanted to kind of create this scarification on this figure to tie him to this time. And this is Laborando por la Libertad is a piece, and it means laboring for liberty. And I made it to kind of connect kind of historical labor issues to more current ones. And I think this piece was just trying to draw kind of to inform people of like this specific labor issue, which I was researching about, and it was called the Braceros Program, in which the United States and Mexico made an agreement to bring in workers into the US to supplement the economy during and after World War II. So they were hired to work on railroads, in farms, and in fields, and various other locations. And they were supposed to get paid adequately and have like good living conditions and all that. And a lot of those things fell through, not just like from the US government, like with the housing issues, but at the same time, the Mexican government withheld some payment from a lot of those workers. So yeah, so I made this piece thinking about, and even now we can see like current labor issues that are going on with the wildfires. You see these images emerging of people working in these fields with massive fires behind them, and they're using their flashlights in order to pick these fruits and try to sustain themselves and their families while they're suffering and feeding all of us. And in this installation, I decided to split the gallery in order to force the viewer to cross this physical barrier or border. And I was thinking of that process in action of crossing the border. So I mounted that hat in the back and the wall didactic or the wall label on that side to force the viewer to take that risk and kind of step over the artwork or step on the artwork and possibly break some of it in order to force them to fully read and fully understand what the installation was about. And all of this was clay except for some small metal brackets that were just holding the pieces together in the corners and in these edges here. And when making this hat, I was thinking about like a kind of hard time or like an intimate moment of when someone comes home from a long day's work of like hanging up their coat, taking off their boots. But in this situation, I decided to like hang up their hat on the wall, trying to create like this really beautiful, intimate moment. So this work here is a lot smaller, and it was made at a time when I was stepping away a little bit from installation work. I was moving, and at this time I was in Philadelphia, and I was trying to make work that was more accessible. That was able to apply to shows with, and work that I could sell for a lot cheaper. So this was some functional work I was working through, and I mean, functional to me. It's still pretty sculptural, but the cup works, and I really enjoyed making this because it required the user to really like take care of that cup and hold it while they're drinking, because it's all rounded at the bottom. There's no real way until you finish your drink to put it down, or you could place it in that the little crate there as a holder. Here's a smaller version, although the photo is very big. It's probably about 2.5 inches wide and 1.5 inches for two. Um, yeah. And these pieces here were made in Philadelphia as well. And I was thinking about, I was going a lot to the museum, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which is really fantastic there. And I was looking at the marble busts that they had and their versions of the heroic. And I was really appreciating how beautiful they were and how well made they were. But I was really interested in taking these examples and kind of remaking them and reinventing them within my narrative and within my histories. And so I took the forms and recreated them with darker clay bodies and excuse me, remade them and treated them as like a pedestal to these foods that constantly constantly reminded me of home. So the tamal was made thinking about like these really intimate and like important times with family, usually around holidays, that we would make tamales. And on the right, it's like more of a weekend thing. We'd spend time with the family just having like a piece of bread, like pan dulce, like on a Saturday morning, for example. And within these works, I also decided to remove the identity to, because they're on a pedestal, so they're like being like lifted up at the same time. Removing that color removes their identity to throw in question like, is this like a stark memory or what? Why is it like this? Here's another example of one of these. This one using that repeated cactus leaf. This piece here was my first attempt and introduction to trying to make still lives. Again, I was at the Philadelphia Museum of Art looking at these like really fantastic and gorgeous still life paintings. But again, I wanted to really bring them back and try to make them more relevant to myself. So I was trying to reinvent these and think about what important things are for me to try to create a still life with. Here's another version. And with this one, I was really looking at the clay. I wanted to stand out, like to be clay. I was thinking about materiality and like how, like where that line is of like, should I push it, you could like easily slip cast one and make it like as realistic as it could be, or have it be like these stiff, like planks of clay. And so I was just messing around with that line, trying to figure out what the right move was. And the base here is made to reference times when I would go to Mexico with family, and oftentimes we would bring back like a pallet full or crates full of goods like Mexican candy, um, different types of breads, different types of foods, and we'd freeze them and then come back, and we'd all come home and unpack it that same night, getting back, and then divvy it up and give everyone back in the States like an equal share of what we brought back. And so now I'm going to show a little bit of some works in progress at Potter Northwest. And this piece here is I made it thinking about my relationship to religion when I was growing up, and the Aztecs' relationship to like their gods as well. So this was made thinking about Tlaloc, which was the god of rain. And I used a few reference photos, but also took some liberties to kind of reinvent it and make my own version of him. And here on the right is so that's the backside of him, and I was trying to further reel in like that he was like this god of water. And so I was looking at pre-Columbian and like Aztec water vessels with the rounded bottoms, and made this like interesting weird little backpack thing on him. And here's some photos of more prickly pears and cactuses, and here I'm just like trying to, so these are layered terra sigillatas, and I'm just trying to dial in what the right thickness is on the red one is versus the white one to create that whitewashed look, but also referencing like that process of taking off the spines and taking off the thorns. So I'm just trying to dial in the right amount of sanding and all that. And more recently, I found this old mold I made a while ago, and I never really got to use it within my work. So I found that going through some old stuff, and I'm really excited to start pressing more tiles of it because I think it'd work and serve as like a really nice backdrop of like some installation work. And I made it thinking about like more modern architecture with these harsh lines. And lastly, I just want to leave you all with a quote that says, "We're all Americans of the New World, and our most dangerous enemies are not each other, but the great wall of ignorance between us," by Juan Gonzalez. If you're interested in following along with what I'm going to be doing at Par Northwest, please check out my Instagram or my website.